Hello and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today we're going to go back to doing some map challenges. We haven't done these in a while. Today can be kind of a special edition. I am working with Kris, MapHatter. We're going to have him on the show and discuss more about it. But essentially, today we're going to focus on putting line of sight and that sort of stuff on the actual images themselves. I thought I would share the process with you. Normally I do this in private, but being that I like to teach people how to use the platform, namely this is going to be for the map tools themselves. Basically what we're going to do is work with the map tools and kind of show you that process. So I have 4 maps that I have to do. They're relatively simple, but there are some things that you may or may not know about when it comes to applying the line of sight. Being that these are open rooftops, we have to also consider those when we are doing this. And pretty much everything is a straight line. I don't have to worry too much about anything crazy, so it should be fairly straightforward in this case. We don't have a lot of terrain and such, but we do have both indoor and outdoor situations here, so it could be that you might be a little confused on how to do that. So that's probably the big takeaway here, is how to handle indoor and outdoor maps that feature both. So what we're going to do is start adding line of sight. And one of the things I wanted to show was that you want to make sure that you're on the actual layer. So in other words, over here on the right hand side, when you're going to edit or add anything to your image, you want to go ahead and place this cursor or this highlight on the actual image and make sure it's not locked. So that's a big thing. I know I've done projects where I wasn't paying attention, and then I found out that the line of sight was on a completely different layer, and that I had it split up between 3 layers. And that could be problematic when it comes to opening and closing doors and that sort of thing. So you want to be careful over here on the right. Make sure you have the correct layer selected. In this case, this is all just one layer of the map. You can put stuff on other layers, but I don't recommend it, because if it stacks on top of each other, it doesn't behave the way you think. So that's something that you may want to consider. So this map is created by the MapHatter, Kris McDermott, or Game Tile Warehouse, if you want to call it that. Been a fan of his for a long time. He and I have worked on different things in the past. He's doing a Kickstarter, and we're going to get into that. If you want to watch All Things Fantasy Grounds show next week, or this week, this Sunday coming up, I think it's on the 9th, we'll be doing a show about that Kickstarter and all the Meanders maps. So this is mostly going to be about the workflow for creating the maps, or for creating the line of sight. Kris has already done all the work. He's just helping to organize it, and he's going to eventually get these up, and we'll see what happens there. But nonetheless, this is just a side project I'm working on, and I'd like to share the process with you. I do these occasionally. Usually I'll just take a random map and start adding stuff to it, but in this case I'd have a little bit more purpose. So over here on the right hand side, I already have all the images added to this campaign I'm working in, and this is my work campaign. So this is not where I'm playing games or anything. I don't have any extensions except for the theme. And by the way, this theme was created by Voss. He made this for the Fantasy Grounds Academy, so that's why it's now really fancy. It's free on the Forge. So I have 4 maps to do, and I added those via the assets folder on the back end. You click on images, and you click on this folder button, and essentially there's a subfolder back here, and that has all the maps in there. Once you put those in there, you have to refresh down here at the bottom of the asset screen, and that will pull in any changes or anything you've done. So if you move files around, if you rename them, or anything like that, you want to hit this refresh. Hopefully though, once they're in that folder, you don't have to mess with them, because if you have anything linked within Fantasy Grounds at anywhere, it will break that link. So you got to keep it where it sits once you have it in there. It's ideal if you can go through and name all of these first, make sure that the correct format, correct size, all that sort of stuff before you even put them in Fantasy Grounds. A lot of times in the past when I first started using Fantasy Grounds, I just threw whatever in there and then I had to go back and fix them later. So you might want to consider that when you're putting stuff together. And then also these are WebP format, so that cuts down on the file size, which helps with the overall module size that this will be. So we'll cut that down by quite a bit, at least in half. And then also the dimensions of the map. So this map right here is actually probably close to the maximum size you'd want for a virtual tabletop map. A lot of the maps that you find online or in product is too big. So in other words, dimensionally too large. So length and width. This is probably about in the pocket. This is a good happy medium. It's around 2K. And it's roughly around 2,000 by 2,000 if you want to look at it that way. 4,000 by 4,000, and then that's your maximum. That's your 4K. That's your ceiling essentially. So this is a little bit smaller than that, but it's not like a 720 or 1080. It's a little bit higher than that. What's nice about WebM is that it keeps a lot of its quality. So when you zoom in, they don't look too blurry, which is really nice. And Kris has agreed to make these at 100 pixels per inch, which really helps the fidelity and you don't lose too much quality. So there you go. So that's just some parameters that you want to kind of keep in mind if possible. You could do whatever you want, but these are just best practices. So you do what you got to do, but just know that having large images that have large dimensions are going to cause problems potentially for your table. And then if you want to keep your hard drive space or your file sizes down, you use WebP as your final format, so that when you put it in Fantasy Grounds, you're not loading up on space, because one map isn't a big deal, but when you got several of them, they do add up over time. So anyways, this is kind of an Egyptian Cairo city. It features both indoor and outdoor, and it looks like there's some daytime here. So I'm going to show you that. This is basically already got a shadow baked into it, and I'll show you how I deal with that. A lot of maps you'll find that the artist will put this shadowing in here. This map was created before Fantasy Grounds had line of sight. But if you are a cartographer and you plan on using this for a virtual tabletop like Fantasy Grounds or even Foundry or one of the others, you want to make sure that you make these shadows kind of minimal. Don't make them so pronounced, because this will basically reflect incorrectly. And I can see there's some of the shadows are indoor and outdoor, so I don't know if these are supposed to be open roof or not, but nonetheless, I'm going to treat them like a open roof, because this is actually showing the shadow here. So it's potential that this height here is out. It's like a stall, and you're essentially getting the light from outside as well. So you come in here, so it has walls, but it may not necessarily have a ceiling. Like this one has a ceiling. So this is kind of interpretation type thing, and that's another part of this is, how does the game master or the players interpret the image? That's a whole nother thing, and I think sometimes we get it wrong. We're not perfect. If we don't look at the image enough, or we're uncertain of what the artist's intention were, it would probably be good to ask, or at least take another look at it before you assume that this is what it's supposed to be. So like this, for instance, these could be coverings where the people actually lay down. This is like an open market kind of bazaar type thing. So I imagine that these are open to the sun. They have walls, kind of like vendor stalls or stores. But being that the weather is so dry and such, they probably don't really need a full rooftop. So this is just kind of like a protective area. Another thing about this is this does not have any clearly defined doorways. So in this case, I'm going to have to decide where. Some of these are obvious, like obviously this is open here. This one is probably open. So this is going to take a little bit for me to understand how that's going to work. But like here, this is probably the doorway or the entrance. So you can kind of assume that like these two double covered areas are probably stalls. When you walk by, you can buy stuff. And down here as well. So these are just things that you'll have to consider when you're making maps, like how do you interpret it. So if I was to interpret this as a closed roof, then these shadows here don't make any sense. So that's kind of what I'm saying. And it's probably a little taller than these walls. And who knows how tall these are, but I'm still going to put some kind of way to block this. So there's a couple ways you can handle that. You can use glass or like a window to block this so that players can still see it, but they can't walk through the walls. They have to climb over or something like that. So that's another way to handle it. Or you can use terrain, but terrain blocks light but not movement. So that may be not such a good option. And then, of course, you could leave them open if you wanted to. But I think in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put the line of sight in here. Probably just use the red walls and then go from there. So usually on a project like this, to become more efficient, try to use less lines if possible, and try to work with the tool instead of against it. A lot of us still don't understand the functionality and how the tool behaves. I still forget. If you don't use it very often, it's so easy to forget what does what. So in this case, whenever I'm working on a map, I want to make sure it's titled and that it's centered and I got it expanded enough. And since I'm not really running a game where I don't need anything, I can actually collapse this menu on the right hand side. So I'm just going to collapse it down to the bare minimum, and then I'm going to expand this out as much as I can. And I think that this will help not only help you guys see what I'm doing, but gives you more space to work with. So it's kind of important to have that space, and that's why I like doing these maps kind of like for prep and not live, because I don't think that works very well when you're running a game. So now that that's expanded out, I can right click and then I can go to zoom to fit, and that'll bring it up. So here's the map, and then I might dial it back just a little bit, and now I'm going to start doing my line of sight. So that's the first step, is to get the map centered, make sure your files are set and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to draw a straight line all the way across this surface, and then I'm going to draw another one across here, and then one back here, and that will take care of a majority of these outer walls. So if you want a straight line and you don't want to guess like where the line should go, you can start at a point, and generally I go the midway point through the wall. You don't have to go right up to the edge on either side. You can cut right through the middle. And there is a little bit of a bleed over task or a section here that you can actually allow for a little bit more visibility past the line. So if you do get too close, there is a setting for that. But I'm going to click on line of sight, and I'm in the wall tool. So you want to pay attention to what tool you're in at all times, because sometimes you might be in the pointer, sometimes you might be in one of these other drawing tools. So I'm going to go to the line tool, and then I'm going to go to make sure I got this layer selected, because that's important. And now I'm in the line tool. So I'm going to draw a line all the way across up here, and then anything extra, I'll cut that out later. Essentially, I could just use like squares, and make this kind of quick for me. I could really use like rectangles and do it that way. The only problem with that is if you have overlapping rectangles and they're butted up next to each other, they're not actually a part of one another. That could be problematic in regards to lighting and allowing light to leak through. So be careful on intersecting points. And the other thing is, if I don't use the line straight across here, people can see through this, but they won't be able to walk through it. So there's really no point for that, because this little gap right here, if I leave that gap in there, it's just going to be problematic. So if a player comes through here and they want to go through here, like cut through, it's not going to be big enough for that, and they're going to get trapped in there. So those kind of things you got to kind of consider too. Like people get trapped inside the walls, that sort of stuff. So you don't want that for your group. It can be really problematic and annoying. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting this line in. So I'm going to start up here in this top left corner. I usually work from top left down to bottom right if I can help it, depending on the shape and the dimensions. So I'll just come down here and I'll just start making lines. And I'm not going to worry about being perfect. I just want to get them started. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the shift key. So I want to make sure I'm in the right tool. So wall tool, line tool, and then I have my layer selected. So that's important to know that. So I'm going to go ahead and click outside, not right on the line because it's really hard to be perfect. And already that's a little bit too far in. So I'm going to start over. So you can hit escape if you haven't clicked on the next point, and that'll get you out of the drawing. So I'm going to click again and hold down the shift key. See, this is where I'm kind of going too low. So let me hit escape. Let's come up here. Okay, so I clicked the left mouse key and now shift, which is going to make this line straight. So that's a lot closer to what I was looking for. So that intersects with all the buildings, and it's close enough. And then when you want to finish a point, you double click. I'm going to do the same thing throughout here. So this is going to be a line, and I'm just going to go down and make all the horizontal lines first. So again, I'll just hold down the shift key and draw through this section. And you just do this systematically, and it makes it so much easier. It's a lot faster. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't say necessarily easier, but faster. And you notice I'm drawing all the way through. I'm not trying to land perfectly on the corners, anything like that. I just want these lines to be straight, perpendicular, whatever. And again, I drew a little bit too low. So sometimes, because I have that pointer thing, it will throw me off. Like I won't be able to see what I'm doing, but it's okay. I'll get through it. And all I'm doing is adding these lines in here. And this is going to take, a different amount of time depending on the complexity of your image. So it may take longer or less time. But this is what I do to kind of speed things up, because if you're doing a lot of these, it can take a long time. And you're trying to be more efficient, or you're not going back and forth between different tools. That's where you lose a lot of time. So if time is not on your side, you got to find a way to be a little bit more efficient and do it a certain way every time. That really helps. Because then once you get a function of how you're going to do things, it gets so much easier. It's when you're organized like that, it helps a lot. Usually you're working on one map with a couple things. I mean, that's not a big deal. But when you got a larger project or a more complicated map, you want to develop a system. So this is something that takes practice. You don't learn this in one day. You got to kind of learn the behavior of the tool. I think that's the biggest disconnect, is knowing the sensitivity of it, your mouse, where you can actually click on things. All those little things add up, and it can take a long time to develop a sense for that. So you kind of get an idea of how the tool actually works, how it behaves, how to undo things. You can do Control-Z to undo a line or a mistake. You can do Control-Y to redo something. You can click on a single point and delete an end piece. So there's a lot of little things that you'll learn. So over here, now I'm going to do, I think I have all of the horizontal lines. Let me look. Looks like it. Looks like I got most of them. This is, I don't know what this is. It might be a raised area. I don't know. I can't tell. I'm just going to assume that it is not. But nonetheless, I'm going to go through and do the vertical lines now. So I'm going to hold down the shift key again. Find a middle point or a happy medium. See, that's not quite where I want. Yeah, that's close enough. Alright, so there's that vertical line. And then here, I can do these walls or these surfaces here. Surfaces. So all this is the line work. I'm not worried about all the little details yet. And once you get this out of the way, it starts to come together. Generally speaking, we spend way too much time fiddling around with one little thing. And that's something I had to learn to get over. Because I was like spending hours and, you know, I don't have that kind of time. So I just developed a system. I got tired of doing this same crap over and over, same mistakes. I just started practicing. It's really what it takes, is just getting used to the behavior. Once you understand what it does and what its limitations are, it gets a lot easier. Then you're not fighting it as much. I'm not saying it's perfect. It still has some flaws, but at least once you get an understanding, it gets a lot easier. I think the hardest part is knowing where to start to click, you know, on the, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's for me, since I can't see very well, it's hard for me to judge where to start the line. I mean, I can see, but it's like I don't have it, you know, this far zoomed in at this point, because if I have it zoomed in that far, then I have to keep dragging the map around. I'm trying to keep it to where you guys can see what I'm doing, but also so that I don't have to keep moving the map around. That also adds to your time. And that's another reason I don't like big maps, because you end up dragging this image around to get to certain parts of the map, and even during gameplay that's really problematic. So that's why I don't like big maps anymore, because when you're running a game and it's got this huge map like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, it really sucks. It's hard to judge, you know, exactly where you know, what's going to be difficult for you and what isn't. All right, so this is getting close. So I got most of the vertical lines in here. And like I said, I'm holding the shift key to make that line straight. You can go 45 degrees or 90 degrees, but that's it. You can't go, like, you can do you know, like that, like 45, or you can go straight line or horizontal. But you cannot do anything else for the, you know, for that shortcut key, the shift key. Okay, so when you have something like this going on, then all you have to do is switch to the selection tool and select the points that you want to get rid of. So in other words, all of these little tails on the end here, I want to get rid of these. Okay, so you can do it individually by single clicking and hitting the delete key. Okay, that's one way to do it. If you have several in a series like I do over here, I can single left click and kind of drag the mouse and select all of those points, all these little leader points, and then hit delete. And that gets rid of all of them at once. So that makes it a little quicker. And I see a line I already forgot here, which is right here. I'm back in the line tool. And this one got away from me, so bear with me. Okay, back to the selection tool. So you got to get used to selecting the selection tool before you mess around with points or moving lines around. You use it that. If you're in the drawing tool, you're going to draw. That took me a long time to break that habit. God, it was so stupid. Like every time I went to go do something, I was in the wrong tool. Like I was in the line tool and I was trying to move this point. Or I was trying to draw something and I'm in the frickin' pointer selection tool. So that's a hard habit for me. It took me months to get rid of that habit. It was so annoying. I still do it occasionally. I catch myself going up here and go, nope, nope, nope. So it's just a discipline practice thing, you know. It's really annoying. But that's just a me problem. I don't know if everyone else has that same issue, but that is a huge no-no for me. I'm constantly aware of that now because it just caused me so many problems. So now what I'm doing is this single clicking, oops, and you see I didn't click properly. I clicked here instead of there. So I need to single click that point or it takes the whole line. So if you double click on this point, it's going to select every point along this line. And if you hit delete, it's going to delete the whole wall. So you just want to single click, and that'll get rid of the segment. And that's an important thing to know. So you just go through these and just get rid of the segments is what we're doing, not the entire line. And there are lines that we're going to have to remove, and I'll show you how to do that. But first things first is getting rid of all these little tails. I don't need all these little extra standouts. And see, some of these I have to zoom in because they're quite far from my vision, so I can't really home in too well. When you try to land, when you're in the middle of drawing a line and you try to land on these, it's difficult. You usually come up short. It's okay if you overcompensate, like if you go over, but if you come up short, you have to go in there and drag it and fix it anyways. So that's why I recommend you just draw through, because ideally you want this vertice or this point. And the reason you don't use intersecting squares is because sometimes instead of this being an intersecting point, it's actually two shapes butted up against each other. And you don't want that. They need to intersect. If you're going to use, like, draw squares, you want them to overlap or intersect, and then later on take out the walls or the parts that you don't want. And that's a lot safer and a lot less heartache. Because when you start drawing squares on top of squares on top of squares, and then you especially if you have them on different layers, that's really it's gonna mess up the map up in regards to lighting and how to open and close doors and all that stuff. It's a nightmare. You really don't want to go there. Let's see. So also, good idea to have this drop down up here active, and then you have this navigation buttons that's hidden by default, but if you turn these on, you can use this to help you navigate. Used to be that compass thing, but they got rid of that, thank God. That thing was hard. You had to left click and drag it around, and it would just move all over the place. This is a lot smoother for navigating through the maps. Some people miss that compass thing. It was kind of quicker to get to it, but to be honest with you, it was a pain in the butt. I didn't really like it too much. I thought it was more of a burden than a help. So all I'm doing now is getting rid of these little tails. I have to do these kind of individually because they don't line up like the ones did on the left-hand side. So these are taking a little longer because I got to go through them all. And this is a lot simpler than trying to individually draw the lines. You're not going to save yourself that much work. And to be honest with you, you lose the work in switching back and forth between tools. So I learned that the hard way, or learn it through practice, is that if you try to be precise and land right on the line when you're creating these lines, it just, a lot of times it doesn't pan out. So sometimes you get lucky, other times you don't. So I don't even bother with that anymore. I just draw right through, and then I go back later and clean these up. That also ensures that you're getting an intersection and you're not getting two lines stacked on each other. That's generally what happens in a lot of these maps, is someone will draw a square and they'll draw another square and they don't quite overlap, and then it creates a weird behavior with the map tools and the lighting and such. So that's something you might come across in your travels using the map tools, and it really impacts gameplay because then players can see through parts and other parts are not supposed to see through and all that kind of stuff. So you'll be like, oh, Fantasy Grounds broken, it doesn't work right. Well, it's usually because we did something weird with the walls. Alright, so looks like I got most of this. I'm kind of going over, making sure I got all those little tails. This is actually, I'm going to leave this open. I think this is an open area. I'm not sure, but I'm just going to leave it that way. And again, this is interpretation. So, you got to kind of roll with it. All right, so now I want to get rid of the excess lines that don't belong. Like, for instance, I don't want this because that's not where I want it. And another thing I forgot to do, which is really important, is turn on the grid. So this is the grid at 50, which is too small, but you could use it at 50. But these maps are designed for 100. So this is the scale that I think we agreed upon. Or maybe he left it at 50, I don't know. Yeah, I think it is. I don't remember, but essentially this is what we had agreed upon for scale. And the other thing is, once you have that grid set, you don't want to move this image because it'll throw all this stuff off. So if you don't like where it's centered, just remember that you have line of sight on there, and if you move the map or any images underneath that, it's going to throw off all your lines. So you got to make sure that's on. I should have had that on to begin with, to be honest, just so I have some kind of guidance. But anyways. Okay, so that's bad for me anyways. All right, so these are going to be lines that I want to remove. So generally speaking, all you have to do is just do a line like this, just that intersects through. So like this line right here, I'm going to remove this later, but what I'm doing right now is removing any extraneous lines that I want to remove out of, the stuff that was in between the other lines. So it doesn't look like there's a ton. There was a few that didn't belong. Okay, so once you do that, I'm going to go back to the selection tool. And in this case, we're going to delete this entire line. So I'm just going to double click. It'll select all of those points. And then I'm going to hit delete. And the idea is you're inserting a point here. And you can single delete this and it gets rid of that segment. And then same thing with this. So this is kind of the way you get rid of those. And let's just say you want this point gone. You don't need it anymore. So you just single click, and up here there's remove selected points. So that will get rid of the little dot if you don't want it. If you want to draw a point in here, like you need another point, you just draw that line through, delete the tails, and leave the segment in there, or leave the vertice. So let's go back over here, and it looks like I forgot this one. So again, just drawing a line through that, and then coming back with the selection tool, double clicking to select all three of these dots, and hit the delete key, and then single click on this middle one. This is what we're going to get rid of, this segment in the middle, and just hit delete, and that gets rid of it. So that's how you get rid of these. Like this is a space that we don't need in here. So I'm going to double click, delete, single click, delete. And that's basically how you can whoop these lines into shape and get them all set, ready to go for your next step. That's generally what I'll do, is I'll focus on the line work and then I'll move on to other stuff. So I'm not going back and forth through all the different tools. You start doing that, it takes forever. It'll drive you nuts. If you learn to do it like something like kind of system or whatever, some kind of feng shui there, it will really go a long way. It really does. I can't recommend that even more. That's probably the most efficient, quick, and easy way to do it. And you'll always know where you're at, and it just helps a lot. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is start putting the portals or the doors and windows. So this is kind of an open market. I don't think most of these places have rooftops except for like these tent areas. So what I might do with these is put some kind of, I don't know. They don't need a wall, maybe terrain. So I might do that where these tent-like surfaces are. Hey, I'm going, okay, yep, joining the day. Kind of taking my time working on these Meander maps with Kris, and we're going to have them on the All Things Fantasy Grounds show, I think this Sunday, and then we're going to talk about this project that he and I are working on, and Rob's going to be on, and it's going to be kind of fun. All right, so now what we're going to do is start looking at these portals. So if I don't do this, if I don't open this up, it's not going to be right. So what I got to do is come into the door tool. Now, they've recently changed this to where you can make it a line. I still make it kind of a rectangle, so I'll use the rectangle tool. One, because I'm lazy, and two, because I don't know if I want just a line here. It's probably better to have just a line, but I'm just going to make a little thin kind of rectangle. I'm used to doing it that way, and I guess it's part of my process. And if I start messing around with lines in here, it's just going to, no thank you. So I'm just going to left click and draw this through, and once you do that, that will get rid of the line here. So these are what you're going to do to open up these sections to your player. So in here, I'll probably do the same thing. Even though it doesn't show a door, it's likely that you can go through here. So, because this is the vendor stall, and I don't see anything out here. So I guess this is where you're going to be walking in. So I will interpret it as that. And I'm pretty sure that these are open market, so you don't really necessarily need ceilings. So when you come up to the stalls here, you're able to, walk back in here. And that's kind of what I'm going to have to do on some of this, is kind of decide. So these actually, this one might be like an open court. Maybe you come in this way. So this would be like a court after you come through the vendor stall. This might also be a prayer area. These might just be covered areas with more stuff to sell. So I'm just going to make a doorway back here, like a service door. And that should take care of this, so you can come in here. And again, this is interpretation. So sometimes we get it wrong. It's not perfect. Let's see. So this is another area that might be like that. So I'm going to assume that you can come through this area. So I'm going to put a door here. And another door over here. So this will be kind of like a post. And then these two areas you'll be able to walk through. So it's kind of open there. And then for this, again, it's going to be another doorway or a frame. So I'll do something like that. And like I said, this is interpretation. I could be doing this wrong, but I think it's all right. And this is already open, so I don't have to worry about that. So this could be where like people come in and they put their horses, like a kind of like a place to, or get some shade or whatever. So it could just be that. And then over here, let's see, we have two stalls and we have this courtyard. So the doors could possibly be down here, but being that this is like a covered area, I think they're going to be up here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple doorways here. And that way, when someone comes to this area, they can come through here. And there's not really a defined doorway, so that's kind of why I'm doing this. So this one likely is back here. So as you come through the stall area. And that it's kind of clever actually, because if you think about it, if you want people to buy stuff on their way into this interior market, you might want them to look at the wares that you have. So that could be a thing. And then this thing over here could just be like a secret doorway. So maybe I'll do that, because I don't see any purpose of this other than being a structure. I think it would be kind of neat if you had a little area back here where you can kind of sneak around. So maybe I'll put a secret door in there. So again, interpretation. It may just be that this is part of the rooftop, but I think I want to put like a little secret way in there. That'll make this more interesting to play. So the secret door or toggleable wall is one of those things that you can add in, and I think, let's see if I can do this right. So you can make this a line. It used to be you always had to have a kind of like a thick wall here. So I'm going to do it that way in case, because I don't remember if the line actually works well or not. So I'm just going to left click and double click here and add this line in here, because I'm going to make a secret door. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So let's see. Hold down shift. All right, so the reason I did this is so that the secret door won't be showing on either side. So normally you don't need a double thick wall, but I'm going to do it that way. So if I go to the secret door and I go to the rectangle tool, I'm just going to draw that in here. Oops, was that the right thing? Yeah, it's secret door. So here's the secret door. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say a secret door, maybe like a disguised door or something like that. But it won't be disguised if you don't butt those lines up. So in this situation, you have to have a line that closes the gap there between the two doorways. So what I'm going to do is, and then you can get rid of these tails too. What I'm going to do here is butt those up, but before I do that, I'm going to go to the line tool, go to the wall tool, and click on this point to this point, and double click. Because you have to have, if you're going to have a thick wall, you have to have this blocking so that the light doesn't go through the wall. So that's an important thing to know. And then same thing with this other door. I'm going to do the same thing. So get rid of this little tail. Oops. See, I'm in the drawing tool. I need to go back to the selection tool. So that's what I was talking about earlier. You start losing track of where you're at. And that's from jumping around the tools and stuff. So you got to watch that. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to the line tool, wall tool, and I'm going to draw this line to there. So this is going to ensure that any lighting is not going to go into the wall itself. That's what I'm doing. And now what I'm going to do is go back to the selection tool, and I'm going to move these points. So I'm going to bring this doorway into the wall so it matches. So now when you go through here, you won't be able to notice a bulge or anything like that, because that's what happens if you don't have a surface to put it up against. It ends up being kind of revealing. If you want this to be a true secret door or a secret walkway, that's what this is. Not really a secret door. I guess it's like a little back path or something like that. Maybe escape route. All right, so that's your secret door areas right there. So you can come through here, and if you know the door's there, you can push through. I could have used a curtain, which would have not blocked movement, but it blocks vision. So it would be like maybe there's a curtain or beads or something hanging there, and you don't notice it's a wall until you like push through it. But I just made it a secret door. But I think the idea that this would be like a curtain on either side makes more sense. But oh well, too late now. All right, so again, I'm going to go back to the door tool and rectangle, and I'm just going to draw the doorway in here. This is where I'm going to interpret where the doorway is. This thing here might be raised up a little bit, a couple feet maybe, but I'm not going to worry about that. So we'll let that be where it is. And do I have any other places where I need a door? There's a door here, door there, door there. Again, this is probably a raised area, probably a couple feet at the most. Or maybe it's recessed, whatever, it's there. So we've got those doors, we got that door. So every building, or every stall, I should say, except for this one, has an opening. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one up too, with the door frame. There we go. So all of the doors are in. Okay, so that's going to be where, basically this is a majority of the work. Now the rest of it is just going to be little add-ons and embellishments. I do want to get into the fact that we could make these covered areas solid, but what will happen is the light won't be able to get through there, and it'll throw you off. And I think all I'm going to do is put a simple terrain tool over this. That way, if you want them to see this area, you can. But I'm just going to use it for like shade and covering, so it will block some of the light. And that's all. I'm not really trying to conceal anything. And as a matter of fact, I could put a shadow caster on here too. So if you have ambient light, it'll just cast the shadow, but you don't have to do anything else. So I think I'll probably do that. So that way You can still see it. You don't have to unlock it, but it will still cast a shadow. So it only works with ambient light, by the way, not torches. So I'll do that. So anything that looks like these tents or these covered areas, I'm going to use a shadow caster, which essentially will behave like a wall, but you don't have to do anything to it. So I'll just do that. That's way simpler than messing around with terrain. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm in the rectangle tool already, and there is a tool here in the line of sight. It's all the way to the far right called Shadow Caster. And all I'm going to do is left click and drag it around this area. And it don't have to be right up to the edge, right? So I'll just kind of get close. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's going to cast shadow. That's all that does. Same thing with this. And all that does is it just gives the illusion that there's the shadows are there from the structure. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just as long as you have the intent of kind of making this look like it's a covered area. And then the walls will cast their own shadows. And since I don't have a rooftop, that's why I'm doing this, because these are kind of like rooftops. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. And you could do the same thing for these awnings out here if you want. And this one, I'm just going to make it 1. Actually, I'll just make it 2. No big deal. And that's, just to kind of give you the illusion of shade without having to unlock this or, make more work for yourself when you're running a game. Because that's, a lot of times we'll do that. We'll put stuff like that in there, and then we'll end up having to undo it every time someone goes through there, and that's a pain in the ass. You don't want to make your games more complicated. You want that immersion, but not at the expense of complication. All right, so that's kind of close. And then I could do like a line tool and do these things for shadow casters. So I could do something like that with this. And here's another one. So I'll have to use a line tool since it's not perfectly aligned. So just do something like this. Something like that. And then over here, here's another awning. So all this is doing is just creating shadow. It's not doing anything else. Not blocking anything other than the ambient light. That's all it's doing. And this could be same thing. This is an awning. So that's all I'm doing is putting a little bit of shadow casting on the structures that are built like a facade. It's built onto the marketplace. Yeah, so that's all you're doing there is just adding the ability to create shadow. That's it. You don't have to move this stuff. You don't have to do anything to it. Because that's where you start creating more problems for yourself, your players, your time. So shadow casters only work like for outdoor features or features that have actual sunlight. Otherwise, they don't make any difference. It's more for ambient lighting as opposed to like torches and stuff. Alright, so I got most of the awnings dealt with, looks like. Yep, there we go. So there's your kind of your marketplace. And you can always go back and adjust. So let's just say you didn't like this. So your last thing you might do is like, let's say I want to butt those up. Just because you're a stickler and you want you want everything perfect. So there you go. I could do the same thing with this. I can attach it here. I don't think it's necessary, but I just wanted to let you know that'd be the last step, is to go through your lines and check it out. Like this one here, I honestly don't like that line. But if I move it, it's not worth it. You know, I'll just leave it. I'm not going to worry about this little area. But I will be thinking about it all night and lose sleep over it. I'll tell you. Too much of a perfectionist. I got to let that shit go. Because it ain't worth it. Alright, so this is basically the majority of the work. Now I'm going to apply the sunlight. So when you're in play mode, you can kind of check this out. I don't have an NPC with dark vision. That's the best way to check it. But if you come through here, this is player preview. And the reason why it's black is because there's no light source. So I need to go to lighting, and I need to go to the actual ambient light, and then click on this drop down menu and go to sunlight. And now there's light. Now what I wanted to show you was the direction of the shadows. So you can kind of see how long they are by adjusting the length. So I think that's close. And now what I want to do is change the direction so it matches what the artist has, or get close. So right there is pretty close. And then yeah, it's close enough. So this is the angle of the shadow that the original artist put. So you can change the direction and the length of the shadow. So the length would probably be something like, you know, winter time and summer, the shadows change length, or the direction of the sun. And then you have the length of it and then the direction. So you can change that. So it isn't perfect, but at least they kind of line up with what's already there. And so that's why I'm saying if you get maps from an artist, a reputable artist, and you're not just snagging them off the internet, ask them to not put shadows in there if you have that option. It's okay to have a little shadowing, I think, around the objects, but when it comes to the buildings and such, you really don't need that. Your virtual tabletop normally takes care of that. However, they may not want to build it that way because they use their maps in a lot of different applications, like PDFs, to be printed, all that stuff. So I don't know if they'll do it, but I'm pretty certain if Kris was going to build a new series of maps, I would request that he just leaves the shadow out and just, you know, you could have shadows like around these little vases and stuff, but as far as the buildings go, I don't think I need that. But that's kind of a nitpicky thing anyways. But there you go. So that's the map. That's essentially what you do. So in this case, I'm going to, once I'm happy with that and everything's set, I'm going to right click and I'm going to download the metadata. So what this does is when you have the metadata, you can have and save these files with the actual folder that you're working in. So in this case, let's see, campaigns, map tools, no. So I want to go to Fantasy Grounds, campaigns, and I'm going to sort by date modified. So Meanders plus work is my folder. And then I'm going to go to images and then go to this folder here, and that's where I want to save it. So the reason I'm doing this is because I want to send this out, and then whoever gets the file, they're going to get the image and the definition. So all that line of sight and all that stuff is going to be stored in that data. So I'm going to send that over to Kris. He's going to combine it, do what he's got to do, and then make it a module. I'm just doing all this, the line of sight work. But hopefully that helps you guys kind of get an idea of what it is that you can do with the line of sight and give you some insight on some problematic things that may come up. And then I'm going to go on to the next map and do the same thing. So this is just the start of this project. I thought I would stream it for you guys so you can see it. And a lot of times you guys don't get to see the work that goes into it. And I think that's a misnomer. A lot of times, though, when you buy stuff on the Fantasy Grounds store, it's already done for you. You don't normally have to go through all this. Although, when you get more familiar with the platform, you're going to want to start making your own stuff. And that's why we're doing this. So you guys can kind of see the process, see what the work is. You can see the pain and the suffering And you can see all the little taboos and the little things that can go wrong. And knowing that, nobody's perfect. You have to practice with the tool to get good with it. I don't care if you've used, cartography tools or what, you're going to have to learn the behavior of the tool. And it's not too bad once you understand what the limitations are, but getting to that point may be a struggle. Just remember to draw past the lines, intersect is really the biggest thing. And then you can go back later and clean it up. If you're doing it as you go, it takes longer. So if I were to draw this rectangle and then delete all the excess and go to this one, it takes a little bit. When you add all that up, it takes probably like another 10 minutes to do all that extra. So if you want to shave some time off, work with one tool at a time. And figure out how you want to attack it. Do you want to do all the stuff outside? Do you want to do all the inside? You can kind of decide from there. And then it's wise to have a token or something with light on it so that you can see what's happening in real time. So if you have a token on your combat tracker and you put it on the map just for like a test so you can see what's going on, that's my other recommendation before you move on to the next map or the next step. So I'm going to try to find a way I'm going to find a token and put some light on it and move it around and see if it actually worked, if the line of sight is working the way I thought it would. So that's your last step, is to kind of check your work, especially if it's a commercial product or something you wish to sell. All right, you guys, take care. Have a good day. Weekend's coming up, and don't miss tomorrow's show. If you're around or if you have to watch it after work, as a VOD, watch the Adam Bradford thing coming up, because he's just joined Fantasy Grounds team. I think it's a good move for their part. Pretty happy about that. I always liked Adam. He's a pretty cool dude. And he brings with him a lot of experience and talent and fans. I've seen people join the Fantasy Grounds Academy that basically follow him. So he's bringing people with him, and he's also got a lot of understanding of how things should be, like UI stuff. They hired a guy that can develop business, and that's really what they need, because they have to focus on the games and the platform itself. He's going to help with all that stuff on the periphery. We'll see how they define his role tomorrow. They're going to explain what he's going to be doing, but I think that's a good move. And if you're around this Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we're going to have Kris on, All Things Fantasy Grounds, with Rob, everybody else, and we're going to talk about these Meanders. And Kris and I are working on a project, so we'll announce more of that. And hopefully this will inspire you guys to not only to support his last, I think this is going to be his last Kickstarter, or close to. But he's given away, or basically for $25, you can get every single map he's made. He's got over like 2,000 maps and over 1,000 tokens. So if you guys want a lot of maps like this is a good time to check it out if you can afford it. This thing goes all the way to I think it was like the 23rd of June. This is an extended one, so I think it's like 45 days or something like that, but it's still going. Oh yeah, it's a still for sure. But anyways, I put all the links for this stuff, including links for the map tools for Fantasy Grounds. And you can always go back and watch this video and yell at me for taking too long, but this is how I teach. And if it's too much for you, or you can't rewind it and watch it, and I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. But anyways, guys,